guys, it's Amy here, welcome back to my channel. Today I have to share with you my January wrap up, which includes 12 books. I read 12 books in January, I can't believe it. I've started the year off well and I feel really happy with myself. So let's just jump straight in because we have a fair few books to get through. January has given us our first DNF of the year, and that was Atonement by Ian McEwan. So if you follow me on Instagram, you'll know that I gave this one a really good try. I read 125 pages, I got a decent, oh look, my bookmark's even in there still, and I just wasn't feeling it. Didn't love the characters, didn't like the setting, and I feel like the kind of big thing that was meant to kind of set off the rest of the novel had just happened, and I had no interest in it at all. I couldn't care for it at all, so yeah, DNF'd this one. Next 6 books, I rated all of them 3 stars, so I just had a lot of good books this month. So the first one was The Wicked Deep by Shay Earnshaw. So this follows the story of a small town named Sparrow, where 200 years ago 3 women were drowned as they had been accused of being witches. Now every summer following those drownings, the 3 women have returned and taken possession of girls' bodies who live in this town and then gone on to drown boys as revenge. Really enjoyed the premise of the story. I loved the discussion on women and witches and the power that women hold and the ability to take revenge and whether that's okay or not. We actually read through the perspective of one of the girls in the town and the experience that she's had living there her whole life. It was just a really good read and I would recommend it to all. Next up we have Anxious People by Fredrik Backman. I had really hoped to give this one a lot higher rating than 3 stars because all of my Fredrik Backman reads so far have been 4 or 5 star reads, but unfortunately I just didn't love this one as much as his other books. So this one, like all Fredrik Backman books, has been translated from Swedish, and this one is actually set in Sweden itself. It follows a group of people who are at a flat viewing, and during this flat viewing they somehow get mixed up in a hostage situation, and you follow each of these characters and you learn more about them, and it's kind of the police investigation as to how this hostage situation happened, who the kind of criminal is, and kind of what has happened basically. Backman is famous for writing incredible characters, and that's what he does really, really well. Now the issue I had with this one, and the reason why I kind of knocked it down a few stars, was that I didn't feel the love for many of the characters for a really long time in this book, whereas with some of his other books, the kind of grumpy or dislikable characters, that they are like that. However, you kind of fall in love with them quite quickly because you see their quirks and you see the reason why people would be drawn to them. Now in this book, a lot of the characters are just not very likeable, and the reasons for them being not likeable only really kind of come out in the later part of the novel, and by that point I was just finding them all quite frustrating and all quite annoying, especially the 2 policemen who are investigating the situation. I just found them to be very frustrating and just not very good policemen either. So yeah, it was a bit of a shame, but I'd love to hear, have you read this one? Let me know in the comments and we can have a chat about it. Next up for the 3 stars we have A Throne of Glass by Sarah J Maas, or Maas, however you say it. This one, again, I really enjoyed it. I feel like fantasy is just where I'm at the moment. I definitely need like a bit of escapism and to just fall into another world, and I'm loving it, so this definitely did that for me. We follow our main character Selena, and we find that she has been in prison for the last few years because she is an assassin. At the beginning of the novel, she is removed from the prison and taken to the kind of royalty of the land that she's living in, and they make a bargain with her for her freedom. So if she fights and wins the king's competition to become the king's assassin, after 4 years of serving the king, she will then become free. Almost a little bit Hunger Games feel in the way that it's a bit of a competition and she's kind of eyeing up the different people who are being like nominated by other noble people to become the king's assassin. Just a really fun read. Obviously there are the kind of typical YA tropes in there, but do you know what? They just didn't bother me. I just really enjoyed it. I love the character of Selena. I didn't really enjoy the 2 characters that were kind of set up as love interests. I didn't really feel much of a love interest there, so I don't know what might happen in the later books. There was a princess as well in this one, and I really enjoyed her character. I thought she was really cool. So yeah, looking forward to carrying on with this series. Next on the 3 stars is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. So this is a very well-known classic. It follows the March family who have 4 daughters who all have kind of varying traits and personalities and attitudes that get them into trouble and into mischief and kind of all different things. Basically follow their life. It's one of those classics. It's very much of its time. I thought it was okay. I mean, the fact that it took me so long to read goes to show that I probably wasn't that invested in it. One thing I really don't enjoy in a book is when there's a very obvious moral to the story or something that the author is trying to convey to the reader. That was happening so much in this book. Like, these daughters would go and make a mistake, or the mum would tell them not to do something because it would lead to this consequence, and they would obviously ignore her, and then they'd kind of get their comeuppance because the thing that she said would have happened. And that just happened the whole way through this book. It felt like I was in school or something. I just really don't enjoy it. It very much reminded me actually of The Alchemist by Paulo, you know the book I mean. Very didactic, very much like the author had a bit of an agenda trying to like create a book for young women to teach them the ways of the world and what they should and shouldn't do and how they should and shouldn't behave. Obviously, with this being a classic, all of the ideas around women and what women should be doing are quite dated, you know, making a home for her husband and all that kind of stuff. And whilst, yes, there are characters in this book, like Jo, for instance, who's kind of stepping outside of the box of being a typical woman, I just found the whole thing a little bit grating. So yeah, didn't love this one as much as I'd hoped I would. An ultimate 3-star goes to The Foundling by Stacey Halls. So I read The Familiars back in December and really loved it, so I picked this one up quite quickly because I thought, you know, I need more from Stacey Halls. I didn't love this one as much as The Familiars. I think I preferred the setting of The Familiars. It's set in Lancashire, in the countryside, much more kind of earthy, natural. It's also to do with like witches and things, and I just preferred that a lot more. This one is set in London, and it follows our main character who gives her child up because she simply cannot afford to look after her child. And she gives it to a hospital called the Foundling, which essentially will raise your child for you. And if you return to collect your child, you have to be able to pay the money that they have kind of paid out basically to look after the child for however many years that it had been living there. 6 years after leaving her child at this hospital, our main character returns to claim her because she saved up the money and she wants to have her child back in her life. And when she gets there, the doctor actually informs her that she had already collected her. And when they look back on the paperwork, the collection date of when her child has been taken from this hospital is actually the day after she took it to the hospital. She believes that her child has been at this hospital for 6 years when actually she was only there for less than a day. The rest of the book is obviously then her trying to discover what has happened to her child, if she manages to find her, and all that kind of stuff. It was good. The only issue I had with this one was the ending. It felt very bizarre, very rushed, very much like the author just wanted everything to be kind of tied up with a bow, and it just didn't seem very realistic for the situation and what had happened. Also, a character in this book that is clearly suffering with a lot of mental health issues for the time, and like stuff like trauma that she's experienced from a very, very young age, and the ending almost just made it feel like the thing that had happened completely solved all of her mental health issues, which just didn't seem very realistic. So yeah, 3 stars for this one from me. Final 3-star book goes to House of Names by Conch. So this book is a Greek mythology retelling. It's the retelling of Agamemnon, I think that's how you say his name, and his sacrifice of his daughter before the Battle of Troy, because where they were, all of the warriors were ready to sail to Troy, but there was no wind, and so the gods apparently told him he should sacrifice his daughter and then the winds would appear. So that is what he did. The book is told through the perspective of all of his family. So his wife, his 2 daughters, including the one that was sacrificed, and his son. This was another one that I kind of loved for the first 2/3 of the book, and then I felt it just lost its way come the end. I wasn't really following what was going on. I just didn't really care what was happening. I loved all the betrayals and the family ties. The female characters in this book were brilliant. It was a clever book in the way that it was told, but yeah, didn't quite love the ending as much as I hoped. Told a lie, I have one more 3-star book, and that is The Betrayals by Bridget Collins. The main character is a man named Leo, who at the beginning of the book we learn is quite high up in the political infrastructure of this world. So the world is slightly different to us, but obviously kind of pulls from things that potentially have happened in our history. There's a lot of kind of turmoil and strife around religious and political viewpoints. Christianity appears to be a banned thing in this world. At the beginning of the book, Leo is shunned from the political party and has been told he needs to return to an academy where he studied where he was younger, and they study in this thing called the Grand Jeu. I think that's how you pronounce it. And the idea of the Grand Jeu is actually quite obscure. Like, to try and describe it here is quite hard. It appears to be something that's tied with people's imagination, music, and like science, like lots of different things. It's really difficult to describe. Something that they kind of have as a competition, so people will write a Grand Jeu and perform it. What that performance kind of looks like, I'm really not sure. The way they kind of described it was that the people would make gestures, but I don't know if like actual sound comes out, and I really couldn't imagine what she was trying to describe when they were having these Grand Jeu competitions. I couldn't really get it. As the book goes on, we flick between present day and Leo's memories of being at the school when he was younger, and a tragedy that he experienced there and how that has affected his life moving onwards. I liked the book, I enjoyed the story, the love interest, and there's a bit of a twist in there. I really enjoyed that element of it. I just found the whole premise of the Grand Jeu and the political elements of it all just to be a little bit confusing, and I feel like some of that actually could have been taken out because it made the storyline a little bit messy. But other than that, I did enjoy this one. It was more of a 3.5 stars for me. Next we'll jump on to my 4-star reads, and the first one I have is The Mermaid of Black Conch by Monique Ruffi. This one is the winner of the Costa Book Awards, and I actually listened to this one as an audiobook, and I would highly recommend you do that. The audiobook and the people who read it, it's just brilliant. The sounds of their voice really brings the story to life. This book is set on a small Caribbean island, and we follow our main character David, who is a fisherman. David one day encounters a mermaid in the sea and builds a somewhat distant relationship with her. She doesn't ever get too close, but they see each other quite often, and he plays his guitar for her. And then one day 2 American men come and poach her from the sea and hang her up in the town, ready to kind of sell her on and do horrific things with her. So David takes it upon himself to rescue her, and from there a kind of relationship evolves, and it's all very sweet and somewhat tragic as well. We learn the history of this mermaid who's called Achaia, and we learn that when she was turned into a mermaid, it was due to the animosity and the hatred of the local wives in the town that she lived in, and the fact that they didn't enjoy the fact that their husbands and their sons and things were attracted to this woman, and so they cursed her to become a mermaid and banished her to the sea. As I said, this book was just wonderful. It was so atmospheric, kind of beautifully tragic in some ways, and I really enjoyed it. I'm definitely going to be looking for more from Monique Ruffi in the future. My next 4-star read goes to From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. So this is a fantasy romance novel, and I have never in my life read a fantasy romance novel before, and so well, first when I picked it up, I didn't realise it was fantasy romance. I thought it was just a fantasy book, because it very much looks like just a fantasy book. So I was reading this book, and then people start having sex, and I was like, okay, not sure I've really read any fantasy before where people just start having sex. Then I discovered that it was a romance, so that is why. I had no issue with that. I actually thought it added a lot to the story. So this book is set in a fantasy world, and we follow the main character, who is known as the Maiden. Now, the Maiden has been chosen as a child by the gods to complete a special ritual which will allow people to ascend, which means that they'll become one of the Ascended, who are very much like ethereal, godlike type people who seem to be immortal, very beautiful, unlikely to be injured, and that kind of thing. The Maiden, we read through her eyes, her name is Poppy, and she, throughout her whole life, has been kept away from any interaction with other people. If she's outside in the world, she has to constantly wear a veil over her face. She can't speak with other people, apart from one friend who is like her lady's maid kind of thing, and her trained guards. They are the only people she's allowed to interact with. She can't eat in front of people, she has to stay in her room all of the time. That's the kind of situation we're in. So obviously Poppy's the kind of character that's not going to stick to those rules, and in the first chapter of the book we learn that she's snuck out of the palace to go to a kind of tavern that she discovers people kind of have sex in, and it's a bit of a kind of gambling den of iniquity kind of thing. When she's at this tavern, she encounters one of the royal guards, who is a man named Hawk. He doesn't recognise her, he doesn't know who she is because she's disguised herself, and also no one's seen her face, so usually she's wearing a veil, so he wouldn't even really know to put a face to a name. Obviously, as the book goes on, there's a bit of a love interest, there's some kind of turmoil around the kind of ascension and whether Poppy even wants to do it. I thought this was a fun read. The only issue I had, and the reason I didn't give it 5 stars, was that it was quite long. It was like 650 pages, and actually I think it could have been a lot shorter. But all in all, I would recommend this one, and that then takes us quite nicely onto my next read, which we're now on to the 5 stars, and my first 5-star read is actually the second book in this trilogy, which is called A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire. Now this one absolutely smacked it out of the park. I was blown away by how much I enjoyed this book. In fact, I don't think there was anything that I didn't like about this book. I think what I liked the most was the fact that, following on from the last book, things have been revealed, certain relationships had kind of come to fruition, and it just very much felt like the story was moving on more. Also, the kind of characters in this one are moving around the place more. It isn't kind of set in one area, and so I just felt like more things were happening in the whole 650 pages that the book was. Love the character of Poppy. She's very much like a strong-willed, doesn't take sass from anybody. She knows her own mind. She's trained from a young age to be able to fight for herself and escape. I just found that side of her to be really, really great. She's very sassy. Like, she just talks back to people all the time, even though like she could potentially be in danger. The banter between her and the love interest is just fantastic. Like, I love them so much. Another thing that really put this one up there for me was the level of consent that was portrayed through these main characters and the characters who were having sex with each other, because this is a big thing of the book. Like, there is a lot of sex going on, and I just thought it was great that she really put in there the importance of consent. Even if there are kind of paranormal kind of things going on, that is still a very important thing, and I think that was done really, really well. The magic system is great, the world building was just fantastic, and the ending of this book, oh, I just can't wait. Like, the next one comes out in April. I don't know how I'm gonna wait that long, because that cliffhanger at the end, just literally, brilliant. I would highly, highly recommend both of these books. I think you'll really enjoy them. My penultimate 5-star read goes to The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. Now this one, again, fantastic book, and I've seen it everywhere, so I understand why people love it, because it is brilliant. I listened to this one on audiobook as well. I would highly recommend. It's told very, very well, brings the story to life really, really well. In fact, I think it like brought me to tears at one point, which doesn't happen often in audiobook format, because I just don't think I connect as strongly, but this one, it did it for me. So Addie is our main character, and we first encounter her in 1714, so the 1700s, way back when, in France, where she has run away from a marriage that has been organised for her. Despite being told by a friend not to implore the gods and to make wishes to the gods at night, she does just that. She ends up making a deal with this thing that appears in the night, and essentially the deal is that she will live forever and she will be free. Sadly, she doesn't frame her question and her needs to the best of her ability, and this entity that is granting her wish for her twists her words, and what ends up happening is she lives forever, but actually she can't make any physical effect on the world. So when she encounters people, whilst they know who she is and she can kind of introduce herself, as soon as she walks away from them, they forget her. So she can't make relationships, she can't have a family, because everybody forgets her. She's essentially invisible. Throughout the book, we flick through Addie's life, seeing different experiences that she's had, different traumatic events that have happened, and constantly this relationship with this dark entity that granted her the wish, and how she like simultaneously loves him but also hates him for what he has done to her. This book is incredibly atmospheric. It's very melancholy, very kind of tragic and sad, but just beautifully told. The book as a whole was brilliant. I'm definitely going to be buying a physical copy of it in paperback when it comes out. If it's already out, I'll have a look, so that I can read it in kind of paper format again in the future. And my final 5-star read is one that I'm actually not going to talk too much about here, because I'm going to do a kind of summary video, but it's actually my reread book for the month. So I mentioned in a video at the beginning of the year that I want to reread all of like lots of 5-star reads that are kind of in my mind my favourite books, and I wanted to see if I actually still love them. And so this one is Station 11. It was the first book voted on by my Instagram followers to read in January, and I loved it. So what I'm going to do is maybe wait like 3 months and then summarise the 3 books that I've reread in a video by itself. Just know that I really enjoyed this one the second time around, so yeah, that will be coming soon. So those were all the books that I read in January. I would love to hear down below if you've read any of these and what you thought of them. Come and have a chat with me. What did you read in January? As always, all of the links to everything that I've mentioned today will be down below. I hope you're all having a fantastic day, and I will see you soon. Bye!